Chapter 6. Consciousness is, among other things, a spontaneous exercise in creativity. You are learning now in a three-dimensional context the ways in which your emotional and psychic existence can create varieties of physical form. You manipulate within the psychic environment, and these manipulations are then automatically impressed upon the physical mold. Seth Speaks, Session 515. Minding the Magic of Life. Our lives are intricately woven masterpieces, crafted by us, for us. Our creativity, our gift of the gods, is the thread that weaves the moments into days and the days into years. It's the underlying basis for our experiences, the source of our magic. In the last chapter, we focused on beliefs, but they are but one facet of our creative natures. Although it's our creativity that allows us to build beliefs and more intricate systems of beliefs, from it also springs other aspects of our being. Emotion, intent, imagination, focus, assumption, and belief magically homogenize into what we call our life. They flow together, inseparable, one substance from which all else emerges. The creativity that hones our days is formed not only by what we believe, but by what we feel and what we assume, by what we imagine and what we focus on, and by our overall intent and purpose. Beliefs form the cornerstone of life and underlie our days, but it's impossible to bring major changes into our reality without addressing the whole picture and without using the magic of our creativity to do so. To consciously create means to become the conscious implementer of that creativity and then get out of the way so the magic can happen. Conjuring up a future event. One afternoon, I entered the Moline, Illinois airport with ticket in hand that would take me to New York City for an interview on a late-night radio talk show. But I quickly learned that due to a blizzard in Denver, a major airline hub, and terrible weather in other parts of the country, the skies were going crazy. No planes were arriving in Moline on time, and none were leaving even remotely close to their scheduled departures, if at all. The airport was frantic with passengers trying to rebook to other flights, myself included, since mine had been cancelled. That New York radio talk show was a plum, and I decided I absolutely didn't want to miss it. So while standing in what seemed an unending line, awaiting my turn to talk to a harried airline representative about getting me into the air as soon as possible, I started visualizing. Seeing that showtime was in less than 5 hours, I imagined walking into my hotel, baggage in hand, smiling at the clerk, casually registering and sauntering to my room to relax a moment and freshen up before the show. The first thing I was told when I finally reached the airline ticket counter was to forget it, that it was an impossibility to get to New York until morning. But while the ticket agent was running through the computer's litany of flights one more time, I kept up the visualization. Finally, she found a seat that had just opened on the last plane to Chicago. And since Chicago is closer to New York than Moline, I took it. I raced for the gate and reached the plane just in the nick of time. Almost all the way to Chicago, I continued visualizing. I knew I had to drop the anxiety or at least dampen it, so I made a concerted effort to relax by not thinking about time and by allowing myself to have a little faith that I could pull this off. I decided not to look at my watch again until I landed in New York. Once we arrived in Chicago, it turned out to be an instant replay of Moline. No New York flights available until morning, horrendous lines to be maneuvered, and finally a seat that opened up at the last minute on the last plane into the New York area, which was actually headed for Newark. I grabbed my new ticket and ran, thinking that my visualizations hadn't included so much exercise and stress. The pilot had bad news, though, as he taxied onto the runway. We were to be grounded for maybe an hour to a backup in traffic. There it goes, I thought, my last chance. I can possibly get to Newark in enough time to get a taxi to the radio station. But what the heck, I'll keep visualizing and ignoring time. Don't ask me what happened, but time somehow adjusted itself for me. I eventually got to Newark and got a cab after learning that my luggage was still in Moline and would not arrive until morning. I looked at my watch for the first time since leaving Moline. And there was actually time to go to the hotel first and at least check in. But my story doesn't end there. As I was returning to the hotel from the radio station, in walks a guy carrying my luggage. Big surprise. It had arrived on my flight with me, but for whatever reason had not been placed onto the carousel. How it managed to make the last-minute plane to Chicago and the last-minute plane to Newark can only be answered by the universe. Ditto for how I got to the radio station with 5 minutes to spare. Magic happens. Magic. That's all it was. That's what allowed me to use my creativity and select an event of choice. Magic is what forms our world and our bodies. It's what charms our life into being. Underneath everything we experience is magic as real as, well, as real as all that is. To use the magic in fun ways, to play with it, doesn't take much. When we set an idea in our mind and hold on for dear life, magic happens and the idea becomes real. When we joyfully throw emotion behind the desire, magic happens and the desire comes to fruition. When we play in the charmed circle of our mind, magic happens because all that is set it up that way, magically. When Stan and I checked into the airport on another trip for a red-eye flight from Portland to Chicago, we were told all but 2 seats were booked. Since we wanted to spread out my computer and his computer books between 3 seats, I decided to see what I could do with visualization. Once we were seated on the half-filled plane with an as-yet empty seat between us, I propped my lowered head in my hands and saw us sprawled in comfort for the next 4 hours. As I finished my visualization, I glanced up into the eyes of a fellow passenger a row ahead of me across the aisle. His face reflected compassion, and I understood his summation of the situation. He empathized my need for prayer before flying into the unknown. When no one came to occupy the vacant seat, he may even have been sincerely pleased for me, a worried traveler with at least extra space for comfort. What were the magical pieces at play in the Moline to New York and Portland to Chicago events? What ingredients had to be creatively held within my mind in order to manifest the desired results? Certainly assumption and expectation had to play a part, and so did imagination and emotion. This extraordinary mixture, this magical recipe, is exactly what each of us automatically uses to get whatever it is we want, and sometimes don't want. We simply don't recognize the magic with which we play as anything special. But it is incredibly special, because we touch the creativity of all that is when we believe in it, and just as important, we touch the magic in ourselves through faith in the universal structure that supports us. Seth says, faith in a creative, fulfilling, desired end, sustained faith, literally draws from Framework 2 all of the necessary ingredients, all of the elements, however staggering in number, all the details, and then inserts into framework 1 the impulses, dreams, chance meetings, motivations, or whatever is necessary so that the desired end then falls into place as a completed pattern. We are magical creatures wallowing in creativity, and that creativity starts in the mind. Mind images. Nothing will enter our reality unless and until we can see it in our mind's eye or sense it. We must be able to conceive of what we want through image or sensation. And then we can bring it into reality as a working model. But if we can't get a basic internal picture formed, we'll never have it. We must see or sense ourselves pulling into the gas station or walking across the carpet before either event can materialize. It may be so fast a focus that our conscious mind almost misses it, but still it must happen. Everything we create starts with a thought translated into an image or sensation, from falling down the stairs to winning the lottery. We simply must be able to think it's possible and then see or feel it happen. I had to know my arrival in New York was a possibility and then see myself there in order to experience it. If instead I'd pictured myself searching for a hotel room in Moline or sleeping on a bench at O'Hare, I could have walked into those events. Idea, conceptualization, and visualization form the natural method of identifying which probabilities we will encounter, and many times it's done without obvious awareness. Usually the stumbling block to the biggies in life is that we can't see ourselves in the position of ownership. If we live in a ghetto and never have experienced riches, the gulf between the two lifestyles may seem vast indeed. So vast we can't grab hold and believe wealth is a possibility. Movies splash glamour across the widescreen, and magazines often describe scenes of upscale living. So it's not that we're blind to such alternatives, but can we see ourselves in the picture? One time a guy told me that he really wanted to own a red Corvette. His desire was so strong, and finally his dream car showed up across the street in his neighbor's driveway. When we discussed it, he said he didn't feel comfortable seeing himself in the driver's seat. He couldn't visualize it or believe that he could own such a fine automobile. And so he couldn't. What we focus on takes form and shape, at first in our mind and then in the exterior world. Because as Seth says, form is the result of concentrated energy, the pattern for it caused by vividly directed emotional or psychic idea images. The intensity is all important. When we concentrate on an idea or desire, the mass of electromagnetic energy units generated by that concentration is great. So great that a portion of our own consciousness is actually imparted to the form. Intensity is the core that draws the EE units into an eventual mass, and the stronger the intensity or emotion, the sooner the mass enters this reality. It matters not whether the intensity is formed around a fearful event or a happy one, a consciously chosen event, or one we entertain through unconscious focus. The result is the same. The old saw that goes, "Be careful what you ask for, you just might get it," is true if the idea is held with intensity and emotion. Seth says, emotions, instead of propelling a physical rocket, for example, sends thoughts from this interior reality through the barrier between non-physical and physical into the objective world. No small feat, and one that is constantly repeated. To go where we want to go in life means we have to know where we want to go. If we never identify goals by bringing them into our mind as concepts, the foundation to a future of choice is never laid. We'll still get a future based on our goals, but those goals will be formed by default through lack of conscious intent rather than directed focus. If the goal is to join the unemployment line every Tuesday for 6 months to collect compensation because we assume there is no other path open for us, so be it. If it's to find a job that reflects our internal feeling of worth, so be it. We will get what we can conceive of, and there will be no judgment placed on our selections by the creative powers that be. So, where do we see ourselves in the future? Wherever it is, that's where we'll be. Maybe the thing to do is decide in advance what you want out of life so you're not taken by surprise. Some people hate goal setting. I'm not one of them. To me, seeing my objectives on paper somehow strengthens them in my mind. I've changed my personal goal process over the years, but basically I select my choices for 3 categories: short term, long term, and life. The short term list includes what I want to accomplish from the immediate moment to within a year. Long term encompasses the time frame beyond 1 year. And life goals are personal issues I want to address all my life for my own growth. Every 6 months or so, I readdress my goals, fine-tuning as necessary, but at least once a week, maybe more, I study my list and think about what I'm attempting to accomplish. I don't consider this a dull and boring exercise. According to Seth, your intent, images, desires, and determination form a psychic force that is projected out ahead of you, so to speak. You send the reality of yourself from your present into what you think of as the future. If that's the case, then goals start the process of forming our future because they reflect the first conceptual ideas of what probabilities we wish to entertain through conscious intent.